Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Poetry 1 course code 403, lecture 23. First we will have a recap of lecture 22. In lecture 22 we discussed the biography, the works of John Donne. John Donne is one of the most representative of the metaphysical poet. He wrote love songs, hymns, elegies and holy sonnets. The other metaphysical poets, his contemporaries included George Herbert, Richard Crashaw and Henry Vaughan. There are certain characteristics of the metaphysical poetry. Since today we are going to start with the poems that fall under the category of metaphysical poetry, first we will have a recap of, or we will review these characteristics that are the characteristics of the metaphysical poetry. Metaphysical poets, they used dazzling wordplay. They played with the words and they used them in a very extraordinary way. ऐसे तरीके से उन्होंने लफ्ज़ों का इस्तेमाल किया था जो कि आम इंसान उस तरीके से उन लफ्ज़ों के बारे में या उन कंपैरिजन्स के बारे में नहीं सोच सकता है. They were explicitly sexual in their discussion of love. Then they used paradoxes and oxymorons, the use of oxymorons. These are the characteristic features of their love poetry, of metaphysical poetry. Then subtle argumentation. They argued, since they based their arguments on reason, on logic, so they presented subtle argumentation. It was not something in the air. It was not something based on emotions and the feelings. They presented surprising contrasts. ऐसे सरप्राइजिंग कंट्रास्ट होते थे जो ऐसी फील्ड से कंट्रास्ट जो है उनको लेकर वो कंट्रास्ट प्रेजेंट करते थे कि इट वाज डिफिकल्ट फॉर एन ऑर्डिनरी पर्सन टू फर्स्ट अंडरस्टैंड द कंट्रास्ट. देन इंट्रिकेट साइकोलॉजिकल एनालिसिस. They presented complex psychological analysis. उन्होंने इस तरीके से उन feelings को उस तरीके से portray किया है कि that is very complex. They used striking imagery, they used far-fetched ideas, and their poetry was full of logic and reasoning. So all these things, they are characteristic of metaphysical poetry only. Then heterogeneous ideas were combined together. Heterogeneous refers to varied, different types of. तरह तरह के जो ideas हैं उनको एक poem में कंबाइन कर दिया जाता है. जैसे मेडिसिन है, केमिस्ट्री है, मेडिसिन है, फिर लव है. नाउ लव एंड केमिस्ट्री एंड मेडिसिन, दीज आर ऑल डिफरेंट ब्रांचेस, लेकिन उन सबको कंबाइन अगर एक ही उसके अंदर कर दिया जाए. सो दिस वाज द कैरेक्टरिस्टिक ऑफ मेटाफिजिकल पोइट्री. देन थीम्स लाइक लव इज एक्सपेरिमेंटेड लाइक साइंस. सो द थीम ऑफ लव इज एक्सपेरिमेंटेड एज इफ देयर इज अ काइंड ऑफ साइंटिफिक experiment going on in the laboratory. So they experimented on the themes of love like a scientific experiment in the lab. We will have a little since John Donne is the most representative of the metaphysical poets, of all the metaphysical poets, first we will have a little recap of his all works, the types of works that he produced. He was not only a great poet, he wrote some of the prose works also that included Juvenilia, or certain paradoxes and problems, Catalogus Librorum Olicorum, Beathanatos, Pseudomartyr, Conclave Ignati, Essays in Divinity, 3 sermons, 4 sermons, 5 sermons, 50 sermons and letters to several persons of honor, and these all were essays, and some of them they were satirical in nature and some others were, but one particular characteristics of all these prose works was that they were equally metaphysical in nature. They also consisted of the characteristics of metaphysical school of thought. So all that, the use of imagery and comparisons and contrast for far-fetched ideas, and the use of logic and reasoning, all those characteristics were present in these prose works also. Then as far as his poetry is concerned, the types of topics or the subject matter that he used for his poetry, they were secular as well as religious. So he wrote poetry on both the subject matter, secular and religious. Then he presented a sharp contrast to the patriarchal love doctrine of his time, because earlier the treatment of love, the concept of love that existed in literature or in the society, that was different from what he has presented in his poetry. As far as his poetry is concerned, he wrote songs which are known as love songs. Then he wrote sonnets, divine poems, he wrote elegies, satires, verse letters and historical epistles. Then John Donne was not only a writer, he was by profession he was a lawyer, and he was a clergyman also. And this is the reason that he was not only famous as a poet or as a prose writer or as a lawyer, he was famous. The most of his fame rested on his religious sermons. He delivered 160 sermons in all, and these sermons gained famous for being memorable, and these contained biblical passages also, and the theme of these sermons included divine love and the decay and resurrection of the body. So he was not only a poet or a lawyer, he was famous as a clergyman who was famous for his religious sermons. He was an eloquent speaker, and he delivered those sermons very impressively, convincing his listeners and forcing them to listen to him. So he was an eloquent speaker, he was an eloquent orator. As far as the characteristic features of his poetry are concerned, his poetical works are unsurpassable, they are uncomparable, for a number of reasons, because the type of comparisons that he uses in them, they are never used by anybody before or after him. So his poetical works are uncomparable in the history of English literature, and this is the reason that his works have been included in this course as well. So, his poetical works are tedious. He uses the comparisons that are hard to deal with, that are very strange. Then he uses wire-drawn logic in his poetry. Then his poetry is typical of cross-grained. Cross-grained is something that is hard to digest, hard to accept. So his imagery, his poetry is difficult to, at first instance, it is difficult to deal with. He uses mathematical imagery, and he uses unconventional analogies and comparisons, because the type of analogies and comparisons that were used earlier, they were very conventional. They were related to the feelings and emotions and thinking processes, but he brought in imagery from vast range of subjects that included a number of subjects of the practical life. उसने ऐसे सिर्फ पोइट्री और लिटरेचर पर रिलाई नहीं किया. जब उसने जॉन डन ने जब पोइट्री लिखी, उसने हर फील्ड से जो भी उसकी रेलेवेंट थी, सिंस ही हैड एक्सपोजर एज अ लॉयर टू द वर्ल्ड ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस आल्सो, सो ही ब्रॉट इन दोज कंपैरिजंस, दोज एनालॉजीज फ्रॉम ऑल दोज डिफरेंट फील्ड्स. He brought these images, those images, they consisted of circles, maps, engravings, elephants, fleas, whales and new discoveries. So he uses the imageries from these different sources. Then in his poetry we find elements of humanism. There is a hunger for knowledge and a thirst for unraveling the mystery of existence. So this very theme is found in all his poems, that and this was one of the basic element of humanism also, that people wanted to know the discovery of human existence, and they were hungry for knowledge. They wanted to find out the truth about things. So there was a search of truth, of the existence. So that we find in his poetry as well, that he is in search, he is in quest of true love, he is in quest of, he wants to know the truth about the existence, about the nature of love, then the attitude of love. The way he treats love in his poetry is different from the way it was treated in during Renaissance by different writers. So his treatment of love is unconventional. He differed from Elizabethan love poetry, and he rejected the lofty cult of women. So something that was a fashion, that women was given a very high pedestal. They were treated as a goddess or a deity who was considered to be an ideal. So he challenged those conventions of giving that high status to women, and he went against that status, and he ridiculed the sincerity and the loyalty of women. He said that are no goddess or deity, they're ordinary human beings, and he mocked them unfaithfulness for their disloyalty. Then in his point of view, he challenged these conventions, and in his point of view, the true love was the merger of souls. It was, he represented it through the symbol of that it was two bodies in one soul. So the type of themes that he uses in his poetry, he presented lovers as microcosm. Once again, this is a concept of Renaissance, that the lovers are presented as a universe, because man was considered to be the center of universe, was considered to be the center of importance during the Renaissance. So the same attitude is reflected, the same themes are used by John Donne in his love poetry. He used the Neoplatonic concept of love. The Neoplatonic love of concept of love consisted of the doctrine that first you are attracted by the beauty of one person, and then that beauty leads you to like all beautiful faces. Then those beautiful faces, through those beautiful faces, you tend to like the beautiful people in general. Then through beautiful people, you tend to like the beautiful minds, and ultimately you reach a position when you have a clear understanding of the and you are able to appreciate true beauty. Neoplatonic concept of love moves in a hierarchical order from one to many, and from many to again a generalized idea, and from that generalized idea you reach the ultimate end of that reality. Then he used religious enlightenment as physical delight, and there was a quest for one true religion. So these are the themes that he had exploited, he has made use of in his poems. Then the motifs or the kinds of images that he uses in poetry, spheres, he uses infinite associations to as the images to represent the world, the experiences in the world. Then he uses far-fetched ideas, he uses extended metaphors and conceits to give the clear understanding. He uses the contemporary ideas, so he merges up. So in this way, he does not only focus on the literary aspect of things, the idea that he wants to convey, he combines it with some practical issue of the day. For example, in his poem Love's Alchemy, he combines the alchemist's efforts to convert the baser metals into gold with the attempts of a person who is in search of true love. So these two are combined together. So both in this way he is able to give the vivid descriptions. But these images are far-fetched. That is why they are known as conceits. That far-fetched ideas are combined together in his poetry. Then he combines these two far-fetched things in order to find out the thematic connections. Now, thematic connection is very important. दो हिज आइडियाज आर फार फेस्ट, वो बहुत दूर दूर की चीज़ों को साथ लेकर आ रहा है. जैसे मैंने अभी एग्जांपल दी कि उस ज़माने में जो एल्केमिस्ट थे वो लोहा और तांबा को जो है वो गोल्ड में कन्वर्ट करने की कोशिश कर रहे थे. तो जॉन डन जब लव की बात करता है या ट्रू लव की बात करता है इन दिस वर्ल्ड या ट्रू हैप्पीनेस की बात करता है, तो वो कहते हैं कि वो उसी के बराबर है जिस तरह के से कि वो अल्केमिस्ट जो हैं वो गोल्ड बनाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, वो कभी उसमें कामयाब नहीं हुए. इसी तरीके से ये जो शख्स है हु इज इन क्वेस्ट फॉर ट्रू लव, ये भी कभी कामयाब नहीं होगा. बट ही इज नॉट डायरेक्टली सेइंग दैट, ही इज ब्रिंगिंग इन टू इमेजेस टुगेदर. वो दोनों चीज़ों को इकट्ठा कर रहा है इन ऑर्डर टू अटेन, इन ऑर्डर टू get the purpose by this thematic connection कि दोनों को जो ultimate end है वो same है. So through some purpose, because of some purpose, some meaning, so because of some reason, he has combined the two images together. Then another image or another motive that he uses in his poetry is discovery and conquest. अक्सर उसकी पोइम्स में, लव पोइम्स में हमें डिस्कवरी का, वॉयजेस का, जर्नीज का और कॉन्क्वेस्ट का जिक्र मिलता है. नाउ दीज डिस्कवरीज एंड कॉन्क्वेस्ट दे सिग्निफाई द पोएट्स urge for mystery, to unravel the mystery, to find out the truth about something, and magnificence. So both these issues are very important and they are a part of his poetry. Then another motive that we find in John Donne's poems is the use of reflections. He often uses reflections in his poems, and these reflections through the that are found in the eyes and tears. Those reflections are used, that in eyes or in the ears these things are found. So another image, another motive that he uses very commonly in his poetry is the use of reflections through the eyes and through the tears. Today we are going to talk about two of his love songs, Go and Catch a Falling Star, and the second is Love's Alchemy. So today in this lecture we will discuss these two poems in detail, and we will try to find out the metaphysical elements in these two poems. The title of the poem, Go and Catch a Falling Star, if we look at it, in the first instance we see that this line begins with a verb, go, and then and catch. Go and catch, it is as if it is a command, so it is imperative in nature if we look at the grammatical structure of the sentence. Moreover, a falling star. Now catching a falling star is something out of this world, so the element of impossibility is added to it right at the beginning. So right in the title of the poem we have two things. One is the command, and through that command the notion, the idea that is given is that it is something that can be done, something that can be easily attained, as if you ask somebody to bring a glass of water or to close the door or to open the window. So in the same way he says, go and catch a falling star, as if this command is attainable. Okay, then first we will have a glance at the whole poem. We'll sort out the pattern of the poem, that there are three stanzas in the poem, and this is the first stanza. In first stanza, if we look at the rhyme scheme, the first line ends in star. Let me read out the poem. Go and catch a falling star, get with child a mandrake root, tell me where all past years are, who cleft the devil's foot, teach me to hear mermaids singing, or to keep off envy's stinging, and find what wind serves to advance an honest mind. Now the last word of the first line, star, and the third line are, they rhyme together, so it can be called as AA. And then now out of these two words, root and foot, probably foot was pronounced at that time as food, so root and food, they rhyme together, so this is A B, then singing and stinging rhyme together, so another letter of alphabet can be attributed to this one, so C, then find and wind and mind, three of these rhyme together, so this is D. So the rhyme scheme of the first stanza will be A B C D. So that will be the rhyme scheme of the first stanza. Moreover, as far as the lines are concerned, there are 9 lines in this stanza, and these last two lines before the last line, and find and win. Now these two lines, they are very meaningful, they are very purposeful, and the poet has deliberately kept them short in order to convey certain message in these lines. Then if we look at the second stanza, sights, if thou best born to strange sights, things invisible to see, write 10,000 days and nights, till 8 Snow White hairs on thee. Now sights in the first line and nights in the third line, they rhyme together, so this is A, and then C and D in the second and fourth line, they rhyme together, so this is B. So the rhyme scheme of the first four line, it becomes A, B, A, B. Thou, when thou returnest, will tell me. Me again rhymes with thee. All strange wonders that befell thee, so again it rhymes with B. And swear nowhere lives a woman true and fair. Now and swear nowhere and fair, these three of the words, swear, where and fair, these three words, they rhyme together, so this is D. So the rhyme scheme of stanza 2 will become A, B, A, B, 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 C, C, C. Stanza 3, if thou findest one, let me know, such a pilgrimage were sweet. Yet do not I would go, though at next door we might meet. Now no in the first, at the end of first line, and go in the at the end of third line, they rhyme together, so go and no, so this is A. In second line sweet, and at the end of fourth line meet, so this is B. So the rhyme scheme of the first four lines would become A, B, A, B. Then though she were true, and when you met her at last, till you write your letter, her and letter, they rhyme together, so this is C, C. And yet she will be, false are I come to 2 or 3, so she, B and 3 at the end of last three lines, again these three words, they rhyme together, so this is D, D, D. So the rhyme scheme of the whole stanza will become A, B, A, B, C, C, D, D, D of all these 9 lines. You must have observed that the words of these poems, they were not very difficult, and the poems are not very long, but there are certain comparisons. Certain comparisons are used in order for the certain images the poet uses. There are 3 stanzas in the poem. If we analyze the poem, since we have seen the 3 stanzas, we have seen that there are 3 stanzas. In each stanza, it consists of 9 lines. And the rhyme scheme also, we have seen that it is A, B, C, C, D, D, D. And then when we will start on with the text of the poem, we'll see that there is a proper introduction of the of each stanza. There is a climax, there is a falling action, and there is a conclusion also. So there is, each time there is, each stanza consists of all these elements. Then the tone of the poem, it is sometimes magical, so we will find all these. So it is changing. Every line, the poet has a changing attitude towards the theme. It is sometimes magical when we say go and catch a falling star. So this shows that there is some impossible task. The poet is asking us to go and do something which is impossible, which is not, which cannot be attained. Sometimes the tone of the poem is harsh and cruel. Sometimes it is bitter and resentful. Sometimes it is self-pitying. Sometimes it is irritable. It is mocking at times. At times it is commanding. It is hopeful and caring sometimes. And finally, in the last line, we find that the theme is pungent. It is sour. So we will see all these tones used throughout the lines of the poems when we will start with the text of the poem. And the poems are very short, they are not long. Okay, the imagery that is used in the poem Go and Catch a Falling Star, first of all, a falling star is the imagery used here. Something magical, something out of this ordinary world. ऐसी चीज़ जिसका हम आमतौर पर इदराक हमें सेंसेस के थ्रू हम नहीं कर सकते हैं, हम उसको टच नहीं कर सकते, हम उसको छू नहीं सकते हैं. So something magical, something extraordinary. Then mermaids singing, this is a mythological reference, so this is another imagery used here. Mermaids are usually believed to allure men to the depths of oceans. So this is another type of imagery. This is a mythological reference here. Then knowing the past, knowing the past history, knowing the or finding out the ultimate truth. That is also this is another imagery used here. Then explaining devil's hoof. Once again, this is imagery used here. Then 10,000, then write 10,000 days and nights till age snow white hairs on thee. So he is being dramatic here. He uses imagery and this is very dramatic. Then go and catch a falling star. Now in these final two instances, in these two examples, we find that the poet uses imagery, and with the use of imagery there is lots of exaggeration also. Exaggeration refers to, with imagery the poet uses exaggeration here in these two examples. Exaggeration जब किसी चीज को बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ा चढ़ा कर बयान किया जाए जो कि हकीकत के बिल्कुल बरक्स हो, मतलब हकीकत थोड़ी सी हो और उसको इस कदर बढ़ाया जाए कि जैसे कहा जाता है कि बात का बतंगड़ बना लेना, बिल्कुल इसी तरीके से यहाँ पर पोइट ने जो है वो इन एग्जाम्पल्स में इमेजरी यूज की है, इसमें एग्जैजरेशन भी यूज की है. गो एंड कैच अ फॉलिंग स्टार. नाउ गो एज इफ he is saying it in such a light tone, in such a light mood, as if and he is commanding it in such a way as if he is saying go and fetch this thing from the market. So it is not fetching something from the bazaar, or it is not that easy. तो कमांड तो इसी तरीके से दी जा रही है ना कि जाओ ये चीज दूसरे कमरे में पड़ी है उठा कर ले आओ, या मार्केट से जाकर ये चीज ले आओ. सो कैचिंग अ फॉलिंग स्टार इज नॉट समथिंग लाइक दैट. देन दो शी वर ट्रू when you met her, yet she will be false or I come or to 2 or 3. Now again he uses lots of exaggeration here, that she were true when you met her, but by the time you will write a letter to me, or by the time you will I will be there, she will be false, she will have turned dishonest or unfaithful to you. Okay, from this is the first line, go and catch a falling star. If you look at the very theme of the poem, we see that the attitude of the poet, we see his pessimistic attitude towards women. We see his indifferent attitude towards women, that he basically has the idea that nowhere in the world true women are found, or you cannot find sincere women in the world who are faithful or loyal to one man. Go and catch a falling star. Get with child a mandrake root. Mandrake is a plant, and mandrake is a plant, and its root resembles the human body. And there are references of mandrake in Bible, in Genesis, and it is used for certain magical charms, and it is also said that this mandrake root, it is famous for its sleepy effects. If it is given to a man, it is famous for its sleepy effect, and sometimes even if it is given in excessive dose, the person will go into the coma. So he says that go and catch a falling star. Go and he mentions a number of impossible tasks. First of all, of catching a falling star, then conceiving a child with mandrake root. So it is impossible. Another thing which is impossible, since it's the root of a plant, how comes that a child could be conceived with that mandrake root? Tell me where all past years are. So he says that in all the experiences, he wants to know the mystery of all the past years. He says that tell me of all those years, all those experiences. And if we look at the all these lines, we find that all the lines, go and get and catch and tell, all these lines begin with verbs. So they are imperatives. And now the contradiction lies here in that he uses imperatives. He is commanding as if these actions are doable, उनको पूरा किया जा सकता है. On the other hand, the contrary thing is these tasks are impossible, they are unattainable, उनको नहीं किया जा सकता है. लेकिन वो उनको imperative यूज करते हुए इस तरीके से कह रहा है कि जैसे ये चीजें possible हैं, लेकिन कुछ और है जो कि possible नहीं है. Or who cleft the devil's foot, another impossible task, and then teach me to hear mermaids singing, or to keep off envy's stinging, and find what wind serves to advance an honest mind. So mermaid is a mythological figure, as we just discussed, that he says that teach me or tell me how to do that, because mermaids, this singing of the mermaid is famous for luring men to the depths of the ocean. So he says that teach me to hear that, or to keep off envy's stinging, that somebody who has the sincere partner with him, others would envy him. So he is comparing all these impossible tasks to finding a true woman. He says that in the world, no matter what you do, he says that no matter you go and you catch a falling star and you conceive a child with a mandrake root, and you tell the past experiences, and you tell me how to hear, or you teach me to hear the mermaids singing. He says that in all these tasks, probably there is some possibility. These tasks, they are doable. They can be done, they can be attained, but it is impossible to find a woman who is sincere, who is loyal, who is faithful to one man, to a single man in the world. If thou best born to strange sights, he says that even if you have the ability to see the strange sights, things invisible to see, things that ordinary people, ordinary men cannot see, write 10,000 days and nights, till age snow white hairs on thee. He says that. Now once again, as we discussed earlier also in his themes, that he uses themes of journey and discovery and voyage and conquest in order to find out the truth, in order to unravel the mystery. So he asks that write 10,000 days and nights, that he asked the reader to go for this journey that includes 10,000 days and nights till age. So what happens, that keep on, no matter how hard you try, no matter you keep on searching for it 10,000 days and nights, you keep on searching for it all your life, till age snow white hairs on thee, till you are old, till you get white hair. In these lines we see that he is using best born or the beast born. Here he is using alliteration, both the words beginning with B, and then in the same line once again he uses strange sights, and sound is a hissing sound. It irritates the ears. So he deliberately uses this here in order to create that hissing effect, to strange sights, that sights that ordinary men cannot see. So if you have that capability to see the scenes that ordinary men do not have the ability to see, and even if you have the ability to see the things that ordinary people cannot see, even if you have the ability to read the minds of people, and you with these abilities, you continue your journey for 10,000 days and nights till you are old. Thou, when thou returnest, wilt tell me all strange wonders that befell thee, and swear nowhere lives a woman true and fair. So he says that even after having all those capabilities, after having all those capabilities, you keep on traveling for 10,000 days and nights, and by the end, and till the time you are old, you keep on searching for a true and fair woman. He says that when you will return, you are going to tell me all the strange things that you see around, and you will honestly tell me that, and what will you tell me? He is sure about the result. He says that nowhere lives a woman true and fair, that there is no woman, you won't find even a single woman in the world who is true and fair. Fair here refers to the beauty. He says that nowhere you will find a woman who is both, who is sincere, loyal and faithful, and on the other hand beautiful also. So somebody who is attractive, somebody who is beautiful, is not sincere and loyal to one man. So he is discussing the impossibility of finding a true sincere and loyal woman who is beautiful and who is fair also. So in these lines, if we see that he is presenting woman as true and fair. So this is something he is saying that this is the impossibility. So the earlier things that he mentioned, catching a falling star and getting a child with a mandrake root and teaching him to hear the mermaid singing, so those tasks he feels that those are possible, they can be done, they can be attained. But finding a woman who is beautiful and who is sincere, both, is something impossible in this world. So he is presenting a sharp contrast here, that the things that we think are impossible, he says that he is commanding us to do those things as if they are attainable, कि जैसे कि उनको किया जा सकता है, वो possible हैं. और finding a true woman is one of the impossibility, not one of the impossibility. He says that this is impossible to find it, no matter how hard you try, no matter what capabilities you have got, no matter even if you could read the minds of people. And finally he says that nowhere lives a woman true and fair, nowhere you will find a woman who will be both true and who will be beautiful also. If thou findest one. So finally in the last stanza he says that if you find one, thou here is you. He says that even if you find one, let me know. He says that you are going to report it to me, you are going to tell it to me. Such a pilgrimage were sweet. He calls this journey of finding a true and fair woman a pilgrimage. He compares it with a holy journey. He says that it will be such a holy thing, such a sacred thing to find out a true and fair woman on this earth. Yet do not, I would not go. He says that if you find one, do report it to me, and it will be a pilgrimage on your side, that it will be a sweet pilgrimage on your side to having found a woman who is true and who is sincere and who is beautiful both. He says that I would not go. And he says that though at next door we might meet. He says that even if you have found a woman whom I would be able to meet next door, I would not go and meet the woman. Why? Though she were true when you met her. He says that he is talking about the weak character of women. He refers to them as the weakest. Why? He says that though she were true, he says that okay, fine, you found one of the women who was true and fair, but by the time, and no matter if I could meet her the next door, and when you met her, she was true, and last, till you write your letter, and by the time you met her, she was true, and by the time you write a letter to tell me about her faithfulness, yet she will be false ere I come, or to 2 or 3. She will be false, she will be disloyal to that man by the time you report it to me. By the time you tell it to me, no matter she is, so the time that you will take writing that letter to inform me about the woman, or the time that I will take for seeing her the next door, by that time she will be false, and she will have made connections with 2 or 3 more of men. So here in this line there is a sharp contrast. In the last lines of the previous stanza we saw that the woman was true and fair, and there he was mentioning the impossibility of finding a true and fair woman. He said that nowhere lives a woman true and fair, nowhere lives a woman, you won't find a woman who is sincere and beautiful both. Now he says that she will be false ere I come, to 2 or 3, so she will be false. So he is making use of another figure of speech. He is using sharp contrasts, he is using comparisons, and then he is using contrasts also in order to reinforce the idea. So in this poem we have discussed the poet's attitude. John Donne has an indifferent attitude to women, and he says that since during his times, it is also believed that during his times people gossiped about the insincerity of women, that the women are not loyal, they cannot stick to one man only, they keep on wandering from one man to other. So he has used the same theme in his poem Go and Catch a Falling Star. He is talking about the certain impossible tasks that we ordinarily feel that they are impossible, but he is commanding all those things to his readers to do them as they are possible, as if they can be attained, as if they can be achieved. वो उन सारे इम्पॉसिबल टास्क्स को इस तरीके से मेंशन करता है कि जैसे उनको पूरा किया जा सकता है, उसको पूरा करने में कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, कोई मुश्किल नहीं है. Then he says that okay fine, even then if you want to go for finding a perfect woman, for finding out a woman who is fair and true and who is sincere and loyal to one man and who is beautiful also, go for 10,000 days and nights. He says that go and spend that time, and so this is the journey. So he says that he is not satisfied. Here he indicates that he is not satisfied with the voyages, with the journeys that have been done. So in a way this is a reference to his contemporary society also, because during the Renaissance there were lots of voyages of discovery, there were lots of journeys made. So in a way this can be an indication to those voyages of this can be a discontent, this can be a dissatisfaction to those voyages of discovery and journey also. So finally this is his he uses a number of comparisons in this poem. So this is a short poem in which John Donne talks about the impossibility of a task, and the task is finding a sincere and beautiful woman. He says that as compared to certain other tasks, certain other things, he presents here comparisons. He says that catching a falling star or getting a child with a mandrake root and teaching him to hear the mermaid singing and certain other tasks, they are all achievable, they are attainable, they can be easily done. On the other hand, it is difficult, it is impossible to find a sincere and a beautiful woman. Then he says that even then, if you want to find one, go on a journey of 10,000 days and nights till you are old. He says that no matter how hard you try and you spend all your life in search of a true and fair woman, he says that even if you find one, he first says that you are going to report it to me, and then he says that no, by the time I go to meet her, even if she is available at the next door, if by the time I go to talk to her or I go to see her, or by the time you write me a letter, she will be false, she will have made connections with other men. So once again referring to the dishonesty, to the insincerity of women of his time. So it is a mockery of women, the way women were treated before his times, during the earlier period of Renaissance, because at that time women were treated as goddess or a deity. So he in his poem we saw a different treatment of women, and the basic theme was that women are not just, they are not sincere and loyal to one man. The next poem that we are going to discuss is Love's Alchemy. In this poem, right in the title we see the word alchemy, so something related to chemistry, something that has its origin in the lab, something that can be experimented in the lab. ऐसी चीज़ जिसका हम लेबोरेटरी में जिसके ऊपर एक्सपेरिमेंट कर सकते हैं, जिसके कुछ कंपाउंड फीचर्स हैं जिनको कंबाइन या मिक्स किया जा सकता है और उसके बाद उसकी कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स देखी जा सकती हैं. सो ही इज़ बेसिकली इंटरेस्टेड इन फाइंडिंग आउट द मिस्ट्री ऑफ लव, कि ये है क्या, इसके क्या कंपाउंड्स हैं ये. फॉर हिम ट्रू हैप्पीनेस लाइज इन ट्रू लव. So he is in search of love's chemistry. He wants to unravel the mystery of love. कि इसकी क्या composition है, he wants to find out that. And once again in this poem we will find a number of comparisons in order to related to the theme, to find out the chemistry of love, that what are the things that make up this love. Do we really find any true love in this world or not? In John Donne's opinion, it is impossible to find true love in this world. We cannot find true love in this world. There are 2 stanzas of this poem, and the poem is not, once again, Love's Alchemy. The poem is not very long. It is a short poem, and in this short poem we have different comparisons in order to compare love with other things. Let's see what are those comparisons. Some that have deeper digged love's mine than I, say where his centric happiness doth lie. So he says that right in the first line, he compares the art of making love with the art of mining, and he says that the essential happiness lies in love, and he says that there are certain people who have experienced more love than me. I have loved and gotten told, but should I love get tell till I were old? I should not find that hidden mystery. He says that I have loved, I have got love, and I have been told about love, but in all those instances I could not find out the hidden mystery of love. And here this hidden mystery of love, it refers to 2 things. He says that true love does not exist in this world, and on the other hand he refers to it with the this is the philosopher's stone, because in those days it was very common. The alchemists were trying to convert the baser metals into gold. So he is referring to that the philosopher's stone, that mystery is still there. I could not find out the mystery of that, because those alchemists, they were not successful in their efforts. They spent all their lives, their time, this had a number of experiments in their lifetime, but they put lots of efforts, but they were not successful. They were least successful. So this was an absolute failure. So here he compares that act of turning iron into gold, that act is compared to the act of making love. He says that even this act of making love, this is impossible. I could not find that true love. He says that this true love is impossible to find in this world. Oh, 'tis imposture all, and as no chemic, yet the elixir pot, but glorifies his pregnant pot, if by the way to him befall. Once again we find a reference to elixir. Elixir is supposed to give immortality. जैसा कि उर्दू में हम आब हयात कहते हैं. So they were in the quest for finding out something that would give immortality to man, or something that would create, that would convert the baser metals into gold. So वो आब हयात बनाना चाहते थे in that lab, but here the word chemic referring to those practices, those useless practices of his time of converting the baser metals into gold. It signifies those practices. Then glorifies his pregnant pot. So here it is the use of alliteration. Pure sound is repeated, per and per in both these words. They have been repeated together. So it says that what do they get after all their efforts? What do they get? They get their pot filled. They fill it with what? So they do not get anything as a result, and they just get substances with which they fill their if by the way to him befall some odoriferous thing or medicinal. What do they fill it with? They fill it with the smell of that smell of those chemicals and the medicines. So they get nothing out of it. The more they do experiments on such things, the more smell and the more medicinal things they get out of these. So lovers dream a rich and long delight. So what do the lovers they dream of? They want to have, what they actually want to have, they want to have a rich and long delight, and on the contrary, what do they actually have? They get a winter seeming summer's night. So this is the use of oxymoron here, that they get, because usually the summer's nights are usually shorter, so winter seeming, it looks to them as if they are having the winter, because the nights during the winter they are longer and during the summer they are shorter. So he has used it in the form of oxymoron here, that they want a long delight, they want to access that true love, that mystery of true love, but they do not get that, and they have very short time, they have very short delight, our ease, our thrift. And what does it say? That at the end, our ease, our thrift, our honor and our day, what do they spend? They spend all their energies, they do hard work, they spend, they put in their honor, their time. Shall we for this vain bubbles shadow pay? So he says that this is what we get in the end, the very shortest of the things. So he calls it bubble shadow, not even bubble. Bubble is something temporary. Even this is the image which is transitory. Bubble कुछ seconds के लिए होता है, उसके बाद फौरन से वो खत्म हो जाता है. So he is not calling this whole thing that they get a bubble. He says that it is a bubble's shadow. Even उसका भी shadow है. उसके आमतौर पे साया भी कुछ नहीं होता है, साया भी एक धोखा, एक फ्रॉड होता है, यूजलेस थिंग है. But here he is not calling it a bubble even. Whatever they do get after putting in all those energies, everything, he is saying that what do they get in the end is the reward that they get in the end, that is a bubble shadow. So this was the useless thing for which they were putting in all their hard work and toil. Ends love in this, that my man can be happy, can be as happy as I can, if he can endure the short scorn of bridegroom's play. So he says that he is that contempt of the bridegroom, he gets that nobody could be happy with this love, because the true love could not be found in this world, and in the end they get the love with which they are not satisfied, the contempt, or they have the hatred for this. That loving wretch that swears. So loving wretch here, it refers to the bridegroom, the person who has married someone, that swears, test not the body is merry. So the marriage that takes place in this world, it is said that it takes place equally in the heavens also. So this is not the body is merry. These are not bodies that combine, but the minds. So these are ultimately, these are minds that it is the marriage is the combining of not the two bodies together. It is the combining of the two minds, their perspective towards life. That is the combining of two thoughts, which he in her angelic finds. So angelic here refers to the lady, to the woman or the girl whom the man is marrying. So he is trying to find in her angelic body that love, would swear as justly that he hears in that day's rude horse minsterly this affairs. So once again he is referring to the act of marriage. He says that even though the two people who get married, it is not the bodies that are that combine together. These are the minds that because the two perspectives, they are combined together. So these are the souls. So he tries to find out in her angelic figure. He tries to find out that true love, and he swears, and he is honest, and he honestly and very loyally he tries to find out that true love in her. Hope not for mind and women. So finally in these two lines he says that hope not for mind and women. He says that women do not have any mind at their best. Sweetness and wit they are but mummy possessed. So they have sweetness, they have the kindness and sweet words with them, and they have got the wit also. And what type of wit? Look at it. First he says that they possess that sweetness and wit, but mummy possessed. Mummy is something you must have heard of mummies, that it is Egypt में usually mummies were present when a person used to die, तो उसकी body को जो है वो preserve किया जाता था, so that ultimately becomes a mummy. So he says that it is stuffed. It is mummy is basically without intellect. जब इंसान उसकी रूह चली जाती है, खत्म हो जाता है, तो सिर्फ एक skeleton रह जाता है. That is mummy. So he says that women do not have any mind, just like a mummy. They are just like a mummy जिसमें के कोई mind नहीं है. And he says even after saying that, hope not for mind in women, के उन किसी किस्म की hope नहीं इंसान को होनी चाहिए कि women में कोई जो है वो mind होगा. And he says that at their best, sweetness and wit they are, that they have sweetness, but that sweetness is no more than a mummy. They are mummy possessed. They are just like a mummy. They don't have that mind, so they don't understand that true love that he is searching for. So a man marries a woman in order to find that true love, but the women on the other hand, they are mummy possessed. They do not have any intellect. They do not have any mind. So all those attempts to get true love or to find out the mystery of love in this world, they are useless, they are nothing, because man gets nothing out of all these efforts in this world. If we look at the this poem, first of all we will look at the rhyme scheme. The first line ends with I. Some that have deeper digged love's mine than I, and the second line ends at lie. So I and lie, these two rhyme together, so the rhyme scheme would be A. Then I have loved and gotten told, and should I love get tell till I were old. So told and old, this rhymes together, so the rhyme scheme of the first four lines becomes A, B. Then I should not find that hidden mystery. It does not rhyme with any of the previous lines, so this is C. Then otis imposture all once again it does not rhyme with any of the previous words, so this is D. Then got and pot, they rhyme together, this is E. And then finally all rhymes with befall, so this is DD. So the rhyme scheme of this first stanza of this poem becomes A, B, C, D, E, D. So this is the rhyme scheme of Love's Alchemy, of this poem Love's Alchemy. If we have a little recap of lecture 23, today we discussed two poems, Go and Catch a Falling Star, and the second poem that we discussed was Love's Alchemy. In Go and Catch a Falling Star, we saw that John Donne asks his readers to go and to do a number of things, and he says those things in the imperative form, in the form of a command, as if those are the possibilities as compared to finding an honest a sincere and beautiful woman in this world. He gives the comparisons, a number of comparisons for this. He says that you can go and you can catch a falling star, you can go and you can get a child with a mandrake root, then you can teach him to hear the mermaids singing. So he presents a list of impossible tasks that are not possible, but he presents them in a way that they are attainable, they are achievable, as compared to finding a woman who is loyal, who is sincere and beautiful both. Then he says that if you still want to go for finding a true woman, he says that go for 10,000 days and nights. He says that spend all your life, no matter how hard you try, you spend all your life, you become old. By the time you are able to find one woman, you should come back and you should report it to me that you have found a true, honest and beautiful woman. And then he says that no, I do not believe in that, because by the time you will come and report it to me, or you will write a letter to tell me about his sincerity, no matter she would be present at the next door, it is not possible that by the time I go and see her, or by the time you finish writing that letter, she will remain chaste, she will remain faithful and sincere to one man. By that time she will have connections with many others. So in this poem, basically the theme was the insincerity of or the impossibility of finding true women, of true and true in the sense of sincerity, of the impossibility of finding the faithful women, faithful and attractive women in this world, that no woman is faithful to one man only. Then in the second poem, Love's Alchemy, the basic theme was that it is he wanted to unravel, he wanted to discover the mystery of love, and he presented a number of comparisons here. The very basic comparison in this poem was that of alchemists. He said that it is equally impossible to find out true love into this world as it is impossible to convert the baser metals into gold. And he says that those alchemists who have been trying all their lives in vain, they have been uselessly spending all their lives, their time, their energies and all their wealth in order to convert the baser metals into gold. Ultimately they did not get anything out of it. In the same way, he says that the people who are in search of true love in this world, ultimately they do not get anything, because in John Donne's time there was the Platonic concept of love. People believe that if you see a beautiful person and you are attracted by that person, that means you first are attracted by that person, then you start appreciating many beautiful people, then you start appreciating the beautiful minds, and finally you start appreciating beauty in general. So from particular you move on from particular to general. So ultimately you do not appreciate one beautiful person, rather you are attracted to beauty itself. So this is the Platonic concept of love. So in Love's Alchemy, basically the poet talks about the impossibility of finding the mystery of love. He says that that true love does not exist in this world. Nobody could ever experience, nobody could ever find that true love in this world. Nobody could be ever happy, because this happiness that we say that we are happy and we have found and we have got the love, this is not true love. That this ultimately fades away. And he says that that true love does not exist in this world. In the similar way as the alchemists have tried to convert the baser metals into gold all their lives, and in this quest they have spent all their lives in the labs working on these different compounds and substances, and they have spent their life, their money, their time. They have sacrificed all the privileges of their life in order to convert the baser metals into gold, but they were not successful. Those attempts were absolute failure. So in the same way, a person who is in quest of, who is in search of true love in this world, he ultimately meets absolute failure, because that true love does not exist in this world. Then in the next lecture, we will discuss two more of his poems, The Sun Rising and A Valediction of Weeping, in which once again we will find out, these are short poems, and we will try to find out the elements of the metaphysical poetry. Allah Hafiz.